Now I am moving on to my next block, and since I already have the orange thread in my machine from the M- block, I am going to just start with those sections. The first thing you're going to do is stitch in the ditch around the triangle, and for this I am going to be doing what I'm going to call the fan or the fireworks quilting. And I'm going to basically start in this corner and quilt out and in, out and in, out and in, out and in my orange piece. So let's begin. Okay, I've just quilted in the ditch, and now I'm going to actually work away from myself. So I'm going to rotate my block. And you may have to fold the side of your block up so that it's not hitting the side of your machine. And I'm going to work in a fan motion doing my fireworks. I'm going to start from left to right. Okay, and I'm going to quilt out and then come back in, and I'm not going to go directly on my line. I don't want it to be perfect. I kind of want the look of multiple lines. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this quilting is to try and keep your hands and your sewing machine speed even. With this back and forth motion, it's really easy to pull quick and push slow, or vice versa, and you're going to get some funny looking stitches. So you want to really just have the same consistent movement as you do this design. Okay, I've covered all of my long strokes. Now I'm going to actually come in and do a few little ones that are not quite as long, maybe half the length, in between some of these, just to fill it a little bit more, and that should be good. So that is the stitching on this orange block. Since my other orange block is actually on the other side of the block, I'm going to go ahead and lift my needle, bring up my thread, and trim the top and bobbin. I have moved to my next orange spot or piece, and I have my thread ready. I'm going to stitch in the ditch around my piece, and then I'm going to actually do my fireworks from this point up towards the outside edge of the block. I have rethreaded my machine with my black background thread. on the top and in the bobbin. And now I'm actually going to go ahead and stitch in the ditch all the way around the border of my block where the block and the border seam is. And then I'm going to actually quilt my borders with pebble quilting. I'm back at the point that I started, and I've stitched in the ditch all the way around my seams on my borders and my block. Now I'm going to pebble stitch in my borders, going over the white 1-inch marker line that I drew on my blocks. I'm going to go all the way around my block. I just finished pebble quilting all the way around my block in my borders, and then I travel stitched to this black background triangle that I am going to go ahead and stitch. I'm going to stitch in the ditch around the entire triangle, and then I'm going to fill it with pebble quilting. I'm going to do this for both black triangles. And then the black background piece that runs down the center, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So let's stitch in the ditch. Next, we're going to do the design here in the center, and we're going to just look back at our sheet here as a refresher, and we're going to be doing kind of a chain pebble. And what we'll do is we'll make the large circle first, and then we'll make the small circle, and then a large circle, and then when we're done doing a row of the chain, we'll echo the circles with one line on the outside of each side of the row. So I'm going to stitch to the center, and I'm going to stitch one large circle, stopping back at the bottom center, and I'm going to quilt a small circle, that is connected to my large circle. Now I actually made my circles, they're hard to see because it's on black, but pretty large. I went all the way to the edge of my border, so I didn't leave a whole lot of room to echo the circles as I did in my original drawing, so I'm actually going to leave that out. If you make them a little bit smaller, giving yourself some more room here on the sides, you would actually have room to do that echo if you would like to. So now I'm going to go ahead and stitch in the ditch down the side, and so that I can get into this black triangle down here. I'm going to stitch in the ditch around the entire triangle, and then I'm going to fill it with pebble quilting. Now I've come away from my machine, and I am going to do some marking for the next quilting that I'm going to be doing. In my purple squares on my mood block, I am going to be doing this weave pattern, And so I'm going to break the large block up into 4 squares. And I'm going to break the rectangular block at the top into 6 squares. So I need to get a chalk pencil or water-soluble pen. Right now I'm using a Soline chalk pencil, which I really like. Actually, this is Fons and Porter. And then you're going to need a ruler. You can use a clear quilting ruler. I'm using the 7.5 by 7.5 ruler. And we're going to do a little math. This large square at the bottom of the mood block is 6.5 inches wide. So we are going to mark it at 3 1/4 down the center. And then it is 6 inches high, so we're going to mark it at 3 inches in the center. So that's going to give us our 4 blocks. And then I'm going to rotate it. And now I want to do 6 blocks. And my piece is 6 3/4. And I'm going to go ahead and break this into 3. So I'm going to mark at 2 1/4. So let me go ahead and do that. 2 1/4. And then again 2 1/4 on my last line. And then the height of this block is 4 inches, so I'm going to go ahead and mark it at 2 inches down the center. So now we are ready to bring this block back to our machine. I'm going to go ahead and re-thread with my purple thread on top and bottom, and we are going to quilt a weave pattern. I'm back at my machine and I'm set up with my purple thread ready to go. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch in the ditch all the way around my rectangular purple piece, and then I'm also going to stitch on my marking lines, and then I will begin doing the weave pattern. Okay, I am stitched in the ditch around all sides, and I'm going to begin my stitch pattern, or my weave pattern. The weave needs to change directions per block. So I'm going to stitch the first block in the top left corner first, then the middle block on the bottom row, then the top right block all the same direction, and then I will do the alternating blocks. For this pattern, you just stitch in the ditch or travel stitch along your stitch line that we just did, and try and do as straight as you can, and weave back and forth, up and down. I'm doing about a 1/4 inch apart. Now I have reached the square that I do not want to stitch yet, so I'm going to stitch down and work on this bottom middle square, doing the same direction. Okay, and now I'm going to move up to the upper right. am done with that direction. That is the vertical weave. Now I'm going to actually rotate my block because I work better stitching up and down as opposed to left and right. So I'm going to go ahead and do my opposite direction now. You'll see my lines are not perfectly straight. That's one of the things with free motion quilting as opposed to a walking foot. But this is way faster than doing this with a walking foot because you can switch directions without having to rotate the block every single time. So this, if you're not too concerned about it being exactly straight, this is definitely the way to get this weave pattern. I used this weave pattern on my concerto quilt in the colored squares, and I did it with free motion quilting. Did not use a walking foot. Getting straight lines just takes practice, so I definitely would get some of your sample squares and just practice making straight lines. You could even draw the lines on and try and trace them. That's always a lot harder, tracing a line that's there, but that could really help you gain the muscle memory of straight line quilting. So now I'm going to do the opposite direction. Alright, so now I have that block filled with my weave pattern, and I am actually going to leave my white strips unquilted. Yes, I am leaving 1 1/2-inch strip, or I should say 2 1/2-inch strips unquilted. That's astonishing. I have a tendency to quilt every single inch, but those are going to be unquilted. So this block is now done. I'm going to go ahead and lift my needle, trim my threads, and you guys can refer to my burying the threads video, which was included in the first lesson last month, and go through and carefully and properly bury all of your threads. Then you're going to go ahead and trim your block to 14.5, getting this excess borders off, and you will be done for the month of February, and we're going to move on to some more difficult blocks next month for some English paper piecing.